Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking on a massive, a really global puzzle in invasion biology, and we're focusing specifically on some of the most diverse vertebrates out there,
Yeah.
freshwater fish.
That's right.
Our mission today is to really get into the factors that decide if an invading fish species, one moved outside its home turf, actually manages to, well, set up shop and thrive.
Hmm.
And for this, our main source is a fascinating paper led by Meng Zhu and their team called Global Freshwater Fish Invasion Linked to the Presence of Closely Related Species.
Yeah, and this paper dives headfirst into a paradox that's, well, it's been bugging ecologists for ages, really since Darwin first brought it up maybe 160 years ago. It's called Darwin's naturalization conundrum. Basically, does being closely related to the locals help an invader, or does it actually hurt its chances?
It sounds fundamental.
Oh, it is. And the timing couldn't be more critical. We're talking about, nearly 18,000 species of freshwater fish? Yeah, that's about a quarter of all known vertebrates. And their populations. They're declining much faster than species in the oceans or on land.
And invasion is a big part of that problem.
It's a primary driver. So really understanding the patterns and the factors behind successful invasions is absolutely crucial if we want to manage these ecosystems effectively, globally.
Okay, so let's unpack this conundrum, this paradox Darwin raised. It's all about phylogenetic relatedness, right? How close species are on the evolutionary tree.
Exactly.
And Darwin basically proposed two competing ideas. The first one, which these authors call the pre-adaptation hypothesis, suggests, well, that familiarity is good.
Right.
So if an invader is closely related to the native fish, it might do better because it already shares useful adaptations.
Yeah.
Things like tolerating the same water temperatures or needing similar food sources. It's kind of pre-adapted.
Makes sense. But then there's the flip side. The idea most people link with Darwin's naturalization hypothesis. It argues the complete opposite. It says novelty is the key. That non-native species who are evolutionarily distinct from the locals are the ones more likely to succeed.
Okay. And the logic there is less competition.
Less direct competition for resources, yeah. And maybe fewer shared enemies or diseases. They can potentially slip into a niche that nobody else is using.
So this isn't a new debate then?
Not at all.
Oh.
For over a century, scientists have been testing this. And honestly, we've found evidence supporting both sides, depending on the ecosystem you look at. It's been studied a lot in plants and birds, too. But for freshwater fish, especially trying to see the pattern globally, we just haven't had the really comprehensive data needed for a clear answer.
What did previous studies look at?
Well, earlier global assessments might have covered maybe 1,000 river basins, give or take, which sounds like a lot, but it's often not enough to really capture those big continental scale patterns,
Right. And that's where this new study comes in. The scale here is, well, it seems pretty unprecedented for fish.
It really is.
It's a macro scale analysis. They looked at data for nearly 15,000 fish species across, get this, 3,119 river basins.
3,000.
Spread across 143 countries. That kind of breadth, that's what lets you start to maybe pull a clear signal out of all the noise.
Absolutely. And to get that clarity, they had to be really precise about what they even meant by invader. They didn't just lump all non-native fish together.
Ah, okay. How did they break it down?
Well, they made a crucial distinction based on where the fish originated. First, you have what they called exotic fishes.
Okay.
These are the ones crossing major boundaries, introduced from totally different biogeographical realms, different countries, the classic idea of an invasive species.
It's like bringing a fish from Asia to North America.
Exactly. But then, and this is important, they specifically looked at translocated fishes.
Translocate.
Yeah, these are species moved within the same big region, the same realm, but just shifted to a different river basin inside the same country.
Ah, like moving fish from one river system to another nearby one, maybe for fishing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this intra-country movement, it's a huge pathway for invasion, but it often gets overlooked in these big global studies. And that really biases our picture of the true threat.
Okay, so they have this massive data set, these careful definitions. How did they actually connect the dots? How did they measure relatedness between invaders and natives in, over 3,000 places?
Yeah, the methodology is pretty impressive. They essentially had to build a complete evolutionary map, a global phylogenetic tree for all these fish species.
That sounds like a huge undertaking in itself.
Oh, it is. Then, for every single one of those 3,119 river basins, they quantified the relationship. They calculated the evolutionary distance using a couple of key metrics,
Right.
things called mean phylogenetic distance, or MPD, and nearest taxon distance, That's MNTD.
Right. So not just are they related,
Hmm.
but how much time has passed since they shared an ancestor.
Exactly. Think of it like a giant biological clock measuring millions of years of separation between an invader and, say, its closest native relative in that specific river.
And they did this everywhere.
Everywhere. Global scale, regional scale, country scale. And critically, they statistically controlled for other factors that could mess things up.
Like what?
Like how many native species were already there, or just the physical size of the river basin. Bigger rivers might just have more room. By accounting for those, they could isolate the effect of relatedness. That's what makes the findings so compelling.
Okay, so they did all this work. What did the global map of fish invasion actually look like? How bad is it?
Well, the sheer scale is pretty sobering. They found 601 non-native fish species have successfully established in 1,719 river basins around the world.
Wait, 1,700 basins. That's over half of all the ones they looked at.
55%, yeah. More than half have established non-native fish populations.
And are there specific areas that are worse off? Hotspots.
Definitely. The pressure isn't evenly spread. The biggest hotspots are concentrated in North America, the Colorado River, the Mississippi, the Columbia River.
The big ones in the U.S.
Yeah, each of those is hosting over 50 different non-native fish species. These are clearly areas where human activity, dams, water transfers, it's all likely compounding the problem.
Okay, those are the local hotspots. What about the invaders themselves? Are there like super invaders that are everywhere?
Oh, yes. The data clearly pointed to 3 species as the most widespread global invaders. They're established in over 50 countries and more than 200 river basins each.
Wow. Who are they?
You've got Sapranus carpio, that's the common carp.
Ah, familiar.
Oncorhynchus mykiss, the rainbow trout, often stocked for fishing. And Gambusia affinis, the mosquito fish, introduced for pest control.
So carp, trout, and mosquito fish, they're kind of the big 3.
They really are. The common carp especially, you could almost call it the aquatic rat. It just seems to thrive wherever the environment is suitable, often helped along by us, of course.
Yeah. All right, so now we get to the heart of it. After analyzing all this data, which side of Darwin's conundrum did freshwater fish fall on? Was it novelty, being different? That helped? Or was it familiarity, being related?
Well, the central finding was actually remarkably clear. The likelihood of a non-native fish species successfully establishing itself, it significantly decreased when that species was less closely related to the native fishes already there.
Decreased. Hang on. So being less related made it harder to establish.
That's what the data showed globally.
So that means the pre-adaptation hypothesis won. Being more closely related, having relatives already there, actually boosts your chances of making it as an invader.
Precisely. It suggests that if you're a non-native fish, your odds of establishing are significantly higher if you arrive in a place where some of your evolutionary cousins are already living successfully.
Wow. Okay, that feels counterintuitive. It goes against that common idea that competition between close relatives should be the main hurdle.
It does seem to, at this large scale. And this pattern wasn't just a fluke, it held up robustly. It was true for the exotic species coming from far away, and for those translocated species moved within the same country. And it was consistent across different continents, different biogeographical realms.
So the big takeaway is, for freshwater fish invasions worldwide, the study strongly supports the idea that finding close relatives signals a suitable environment. And that seems to outweigh the potential downside of competition.
Exactly. It directly contradicts the classic interpretation of Darwin's naturalization hypothesis, at least for fish at this scale.
Is this fundamentally different from what scientists see in other groups like plants? Why would suitability be such a dominant factor for fish compared to competition?
Well, that ties into the second big ecological idea they tested. The relationship between how many native species are present and how easy it is for invaders to get in.
Ah, right. The whole biotic resistance versus biotic acceptance thing.
Exactly. Does a rich, diverse native community act like a shield resisting invaders? That's biotic resistance. Or do really favorable environments just support lots of species, both native and non-native? That's biotic acceptance.
And what did their huge data set say about that?
Again, the findings strongly backed the suitability argument. They found that higher native species richness, having more native species around, actually had a positive effect on non-native fish occurrence.
Positive. So more native species meant it was easier for non-natives to invade.
It meant a greater likelihood of invasion success, yeah.
Okay, so that completely flips the script on the diverse communities are invasion-proof idea.
It really does at this river basin scale. It suggests that if the native fish are doing well and are diverse, it's basically a big flashing sign saying, this is a great place to live. And that welcome sign seems to be more important than any resistance the locals might put up.
So if you put those two findings together, that suitability beats resistance, and that having close relatives around is a good sign, the overall message is that fitting into the physical environment is the main filter for fish invasions at this big scale.
That's the core argument. Shared physiological traits, things like being able to handle the same temperature ranges or low oxygen levels or seasonal flows, these things are often conserved among close relatives. And having those traits already suited to the place gives invaders a massive leg up.
And that advantage is apparently bigger than the disadvantage of having to compete with those relatives.
It seems so. And the authors offer a really interesting idea for why this might be especially true for fish compared to something like a plant.
Okay.
It comes down to mobility and maybe even cognitive abilities. Think about it. A plant seed lands somewhere. If it lands right next to a successful relative, it's stuck there. It has to fight for that exact same patch of soil, sunlight, water.
Right, it can't just pick up and move.
But a fish can. A non-native fish might arrive and benefit from the fact that its native cousins prove the temperature is right. But then it can use its ability to swim, its behavior, to maybe find a slightly different depth or a spot with less current, or maybe feed at a different time, basically. Find a microhabitat within that suitable basin where the direct competition isn't quite so intense.
Ah, so they get the benefit of the shared adaptation, the environmental fit, but they can use movement to dodge the worst of the head-to-head competition.
That's the synthesis they propose. This behavioral flexibility allows fish to leverage the pre-adaptation advantage without paying the full price of competition that a stationary organism might. And that seems to explain this robust global pattern for freshwater fish.
That's a really neat mechanism. Okay, let's bring this back to the real world. We know pre-adaptation is key globally. We know the hotspots, North America, Palearctic for translocations. What should this mean for, say, policy or conservation management?
Well, first off, it means we should really prioritize watching those hotspots closely, especially areas where we know close relatives of known successful invaders are already living. That's where the risk is likely highest.
Makes sense.
But critically, management needs to pay way more attention to those translocated fishes. The study found that these intra-country movements have led to fish colonizing almost 20% of the world's river basins.
20% just from moving fish around within a country.
Yeah. It strongly suggests this is a seriously overlooked threat pathway that probably needs much better regulation. Not all invaders need a passport.
That's a really important point for policymakers. Stopping fish movement between watersheds within a country could be just as vital as stopping international imports.
Absolutely. Now, we do have to be fair and acknowledge the study's limitations, which the authors themselves point out. They raise some important caveats.
Like what?
Well, first, actually identifying which species are translocated versus truly native can be really tricky. River systems are interconnected, historical records are often patchy.
So there could be errors in classifying fish.
There could be, yeah. And that might introduce some sampling bias. Maybe we see more translocations in places like the US and Europe, partly because those areas just have better historical data and monitoring.
Okay, that's fair.
Oh, well. Second big one is propagal pressure. Remember those super invaders like carp and trout?
Yeah.
Many of those are intentionally introduced, sometimes in huge numbers, over and over again for fishing or aquaculture. If a species gets dumped into a river by the thousands, its success might just be down to sheer numbers, overwhelming any natural filters.
Right, it swamps the system.
Exactly. And the data they use can't easily distinguish between a species failing to establish because the environment was wrong versus it simply never being introduced there in the first place or not introduced enough times. That introduction intensity is hard to measure globally.
That makes sense. And any other limitations?
The last main one is scale. We've established that at this large river basin scale, environmental filtering looks dominant. Pre-adaptation wins. But the authors are careful to say, look, if you zoomed way in, down to a single small pond or one specific stretch of a stream, at that very local scale, direct biotic interactions competition, predation might still be the most important factor, just like the classic naturalization hypothesis predicts.
So the dominant force might depend on the scale you're looking at.
It very likely does. The global pattern points one way, but local fights are probably still fierce.
Okay, so this deep dive has given us a really powerful, large-scale verdict on one of ecology's classic debates. For freshwater fish invasions across the globe, it seems evolutionary history matters a lot. Being closely related to the locals is a strong predictor of success, mainly because it signals the environment is right.
Hmm.
Fish leverage those shared adaptations, but use their mobility to perhaps lessen the competitive blow.
That's a great summary. And if we think about the bigger picture, connecting this to our rapidly changing world, it really tees up the next big question for research, doesn't it?
Which is,
Well, we now have a better handle on the global role of this phylogenetic relatedness, but how does its influence actually stack up against other major drivers in the Anthropocene? Things like, direct human activities, building canals that connect rivers, global trade moving species around accidentally, or even the specific functional traits of the fish themselves. How fast do they reproduce? What do they eat? How tolerant are they of pollution?
so integrating the evolutionary story with the human impact story and the species' own ecological toolkit.
Exactly. Building models that can weigh phylogenetic relatedness alongside human pressures and functional traits, that's surely the next step if we want to get better at forecasting where the next big fish invasion might happen and maybe how to prevent it.
A complex challenge, but clearly a vital one. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating links between evolution, environment, and invasion success in the world's freshwaters.